On a cold February night in 1855, the people of Devon, England, awoke to a mystery that would haunt them for generations. Strange, hoof-like tracks had appeared in the snow, stretching for miles, crossing rooftops, high walls, and even rivers, as if some unseen entity had walked straight through obstacles without hesitation. Some believed it was the work of an animal. Others, a bizarre weather phenomenon, and some yet believed that it was the footprints of the devil himself. This is Zumundous, and tonight we're diving deep into this eerie legend. What could have left those footprints? Is there a scientific explanation, or was it perhaps a hoax? Let's find out. And welcome to Zumundous. I'm Doolin.
And I'm Keith.
I noticed we stopped saying the episode number. It didn't really matter, I don't think.
No.
For reference, I think it's 22 or something, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
I could be wrong as well.
It'll say down there.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming back to see us, guys. So this week, we're going to talk about the Devil's Footprints. Now, this is an event that happened overseas in England in 1855. Man,
yeah,
a long time ago.
On February 8th or 9th, right?
Yeah, February 8th or 9th. We just passed that a couple weeks ago. So
a couple days ago.
Well, at the time of this recording, yeah.
Yeah.
But not at the time of posting this.
And that would be 100 and brain hurt years.
Numbers are hard.
Lots of years ago. It's the anniversary anyway. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So this is a superstitious story, a little bit, where people were scared when they woke up in the morning to this crazy event.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think this is England in the 1850s, and just as in America in the 1850s, people.
It was 1850.
It was 1850s. I think the further back you go in time, the more superstitious people were, because because as we grow, we have a better understanding of things. For the people in the 1850s, if they couldn't understand it, they was like, oh, devil. Obviously, it's the devil. It's like these strange footprints. They look like hooves. The devil has hooves. It's the devil.
I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but I guess people would definitely be a little quicker to jump to a conclusion there. When the whole thing about this is that they didn't look like deer tracks to them,
right,
and things like that.
It wasn't tracks that they were used to seeing, right. And they lived in this area.
Like in 1855 in rural England, you would probably know what most of the animals walking around leave.
Yeah, you would think.
You might not be a farmer, but you're like, oh, that could be a pig track or a cow, or whatever, right?
Right.
Or a horse, that kind of thing. But the weird thing about this is the distance that it covered, the way it covered it, makes it a little bit more not superstitious, a little more prone to superstition.
Yeah. So in this happened over the course of a few nights, I think. So it was the 8th and the 9th of February, 1855. And it was after heavy snowfall, and these tracks appeared in the snow. But so they measured about 4 inches long and 3 across, and between 8 and 16 inches apart, and mostly single file. Which seems kind of strange. So, that begs the question. And you were mentioning something about the distance.
Well, yeah. So the distance that it covered were between 40 and 100 miles.
Right.
Which is 60 to 160 kilometers. That's a lot.
That's a long way.
It's a long way for anybody, a person to walk. They could do it, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
An animal, maybe a little faster, but I think a horse or anything would take a break, right?
Obviously.
Instead of walking 100 miles straight.
And it left its marks on these frozen lakes, rivers.
Yep.
Over haystacks, vanished through small holes and thickets, only to appear abruptly on the other side.
Ooh, I didn't read that.
Oh,
that's
okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So
it also went up. What is it? Snow-covered roofs, high walls that lay in the footprints path, as well as leading up to drain pipes and stuff, as small as 4 inches in diameter, which that's pretty small for a big animal to get through, obviously. Pretty wild. But I read or saw another YouTube video where it said they went up the side of walls and up a house and then over across. Yeah. I was like, okay, this is getting a little silly.
Not like the footprints on the wall. You can't leave footprints on the wall because snow doesn't stick to a wall like that. So
yeah,
I mean, yeah. So basically, it would have to be
it
would have to go to the wall and then continue on the roof.
Yeah, it was silly to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they claim that it leapt over walls in some cases, or leapt over buildings and structures. One wall as high as 14 feet tall and made their way, the footprints, from door to door. Now, this is where some more of that religious superstition comes in, which is the fact that the prints went from door to door. People felt that mirrored the biblical story from the book of Exodus, which was the plague of the firstborn, where they would mark the doors. So the plague of the firstborn was the 10th and final plague that God brought the people of Egypt, and this seemed to kind of mirror that. So I think that's also like another thing
that would definitely make
they're like, it's the devil's footprints. It was like the plague of the firstborn. But there are a couple more things they noticed about this is the tops of the snow-covered roofs, high walls that lay in the footprints paths. It seemed to resemble a donkey's footprints, they said.
Yeah.
But the strides of the prints suggested that they weren't.
Right.
So they did as
like a mini donkey.
Yeah, maybe. Because what was it, like 8 and 16 inches were the strides. So that's way too small for a donkey.
Well, there's a couple cool ideas that this could actually be. And
yeah.
You turned me on to one that I think might actually be the case.
Well, yeah. All right.
Yeah. You want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, we will. But I just want to talk before we get into some of that. I want to talk about the response, what they did. So, like I was going to say, they did what any townspeople or villagers in the 1850s that you would expect them to do. They absolutely did it. They organized a mob and went hunting for the devil.
Okay.
Which kind of seemed to remind me a little bit of the War of the Worlds when that aired in like the 1930s and people thought it was a real radio cast.
Yeah, they thought it was real.
Yeah, so I mean, this is like kind of it's sort of that kind of mob mentality. Militias and townspeople armed up and went out to track down and kill whatever might be the source. And this wasn't just in the town of Devon. There's actually the nearby town of Dawlish. Mm-hmm. Tradesmen took up guns and bludgeons, set off across the moors in pursuit of the beast. But though the tracks were clear as day, they weren't able to find anything.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So it wasn't the belief that Satan had been among them kind of drove them into a panic, and they implemented a self-imposed curfew. People refused to venture outdoors after nightfall. Now there was a magazine, Bell's Life in Sydney. This is an 1855 issue that was published. This is dated 18th of February. So this is about 10 days later. And I'm just going to read a little excerpt from that because, as you mentioned before we started recording, like this was very sensationalized by the headlines.
Yeah, the media at the time was big.
They went into it. So there's a big long thing here. I'm just going to read a little blurb of it. The superstitious go so far as to believe that they are the marks of Satan himself, and that the great excitement has been produced among all classes may be judged from the fact that the subject has been descanted on from the pulpit. They had a very weird way of talking back then. It appears on Thursday last night, there was a very heavy snowfall in the neighborhood of Exeter and south of Devon. On the following morning, the inhabitants of the above town were surprised at discovering the footmarks of some strange and mysterious animal endowed with the power of ubiquity, as the footprints, God, they have long sentences, as the footprints were seen in all kinds of unaccountable places, on the tops of houses and narrow walls, in the gardens and courtyard enclosed by high walls and palings, as well as open fields. Jesus, they have long sentences. Like, these people not know about put a period in your sentence, man.
Yeah, grammar was not our.
Yeah, well, I mean, grammar was a thing, but it was just like, God, that was such a long sentence. But yeah, so as you can tell, so this went out into the newspapers of the time, and it very understandably drove people into a frenzy. Mm-hmm. But the thing about it is, very little evidence of the phenomenon. The only known documents were the above publication from the above publication that I just read. Right. So, but there's some hypotheses that go into this, and I'll let you rattle some of those off.
So we got a few hypotheses here, and some of them are pretty interesting. There's a good one that I like where Jeffrey Household suggested that it was actually an experimental balloon, like a weather balloon or something, that was released by mistake from the Devonport dockyard, and that it left the tracks by trailing 2 shackles at the end of its mooring ropes, right? A pretty strong balloon. It could drag something through the snow like that. And his source was a local man. You can read about that. It's pretty cool. Okay, so that would make sense. And that's why you wouldn't find anything, right?
Yeah,
now, going house to house, it makes sense it could jump a wall.
That would.
Disappearing in a pipe is kind of weird because obviously you can't drag a chain through a pipe when you're in a thing. But reappearing at the proper exit would be the part that would be difficult there. But, hey, crazy stuff happens. My favorite one, well, a lot of people, okay, not my favorite one. Badger, raccoons, those kinds of things. Possums and all that kind of stuff have been potential suspects. My favorite potential suspect, and possibly another cryptid, is a kangaroo. And I like this because I didn't, kangaroos live in Australia.
Right. So I guess
why would Chewbacca, a Wookiee, want to hang out with the Ewoks?
It's actually funny. I read something. I read something on that, the kangaroo theory. But I'll let you go ahead. Yeah, take it.
There's actual sightings constantly in England of wallabies, which are like small kangaroos.
Yes.
And I had never heard that before. I found that fascinating because we found other animals that aren't from England that actually live there,
right,
and have somehow been successful. Obviously the big black cats, the big panthers that are there, being the Beast of Bodmin Moor being the greatest example of that, right? There are monstrous cats in England. Maybe there's a bunch of kangaroos hopping around too. I'd never seen one, but they could.
Well, yeah, and there was actually something I read. One of the theories was that there was a kangaroo, or some kangaroos, maybe enough to make a small breeding population.
Okay, yep.
Had escaped from a menagerie, or basically like what would have been a zoo back then, essentially.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of cool.
Kangaroos are a possibility. However,
but it's not.
It doesn't account for the strides.
It does not. No.
Kangaroos have way bigger strides.
They got 2 feet, big feet, all that kind of stuff. So, but you have I think the best one.
Yeah, this is the one that I thought was most interesting, and that was something really simple: field mice, hopping mice. The fact that the strides, the size of them and everything, and it essentially just mirrors, because it was a single stride, right? Like what, 4 to 8 inches, 16 inches, whatever it was.
16 inches, something like that.
So that could have very easily been mice just hopping through the snow.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that, they say it went between 40 and 100 miles, but no single person walked
no single person walked
100 miles. So
but also,
this is also part of how information changes throughout the years.
But also would account for the fact that it disappeared in thickets.
Right.
And then came out the other side.
Goes through a little pipe.
Goes through a pipe. On top of roofs, like mice can get up there, or it can go to a building and then go under the building.
Indeed. Or it goes from house to house because they like to get warm.
Right. Makes sense.
I mean, mice come inside looking for water and or warmth, during the wintertime.
So I have a little follow up to that. So the lack of photographic evidence from 1855 makes the whole episode impossible to resolve, but not all is lost, because in 2009, a resident of North Devon woke up to find there overnight the snow-covered, her snow-covered back garden had been imprinted by hoof prints, exactly like what they saw back then, exactly how it was described.
Okay.
So she took pictures, sent them to a zoologist, and this is what the zoologist said: field mice.
That's awesome. They also, it was suggested that there was a weird weather pattern of the snow melting and refreezing a bunch of times, and that kind of making the little divots in the thing. But I like the field mice one. I'm gonna go with debunked.
Yeah, I think it's debunked.
Yeah,
man.
100%. The mighty field mouse.
I think we're gonna wrap it there, man. So whether it was a mass hysteria, an elaborate hoax, or something beyond our understanding, it was field mice. Maybe we'll never know.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on Zumundous, guys. Come on back next week. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Field mice, dude.
Yeah.
It was field mice.
They're just hopping around, having fun.
Peter Cottontail hopping on his way.
Yeah.
Let's go! Zumundous.